I never thought I'd be the guy hiring a private investigator to spy on his own wife. But here I was, sitting across from Mark, a seasoned PI with a weathered face and graying hair, discussing the details of my crumbling marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me as a software engineer. I spent my days creating systems to connect people, and now I was paying someone to expose my wife's deceit. "So, John," Mark said, his voice gruff but professional, "tell me what's been going on." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my suspicions pressing down on my chest. It started small, I began, my voice steadier than I felt inside. Emily's always been attached to her phone, but lately it's been different. She's constantly smiling at messages, giggling like a teenager. When I ask, she says it's her mother, but something doesn't add up. Mark nodded, jotting down notes in a small, worn notebook. I continued, each word feeling like a betrayal of the trust I'd once had in my marriage. "Then there are the late nights at work. She used to be home by 6, but now, it's anyone's guess. I've called her office, and her co-workers say she's left hours ago. But she doesn't get home until much later." I paused, running a hand through my short brown hair. The next part was the hardest to say out loud. "The final straw was last night. She went out for milk at 11:30 p.m. didn't come back until 2 a.m. Her excuses, they just don't hold water anymore." Mark looked up from his notebook, his eyes sharp and assessing. "And you sure you want to pursue this, John? Sometimes ignorance is bliss." I met his gaze, feeling a cold determination settling in my gut. "I need to know the truth, Mark, whatever it is." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my resolve. "All right, I'll start surveillance tomorrow. It usually takes a couple of weeks to gather solid evidence. Are you prepared for what we might find?" Was I? The thought of concrete proof of Millie's infidelity made my stomach churn. But the alternative, living in this limbo of suspicion and doubt, was worse. "I am," I said, my voice low but firm. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. I went through the motions of our daily life, pretending everything was normal while my mind raced with possibilities. Emily continued her routine of late nights and secretive phone conversations, oblivious to the fact that her every move was being watched and documented. I threw myself into my work, staying late at the office to avoid going home to an empty house, or worse, facing Emily's lies. My colleagues noticed the change in my demeanor, but I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses about a challenging project. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mark called me to his office. As I sat down across from him, I steeled myself for what was to come. "I'm sorry, John," Mark said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk, "but I think you already knew what we'd find." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of photos, each one a dagger to my heart. Emily, my wife of 5 years, locked in passionate embraces with a man I didn't recognize, leaving hotels together, sharing intimate dinners at restaurants we used to frequent. "His name is Dave," Mark explained, his voice oddly gentle. "He's a senior executive at Emily's company. Married." I nodded numbly, flipping through the photos. There was Emily, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she laughed at something Dave said. Her green eyes, which used to light up for me, now sparkled for him. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "There's more," Mark continued. "I've got GPS tracking data from her car, phone records, even some audio recordings from their encounters." He hesitated. "Do you want to hear them?" I shook my head quickly. The photos were bad enough. I couldn't bear to hear her voice in those moments. "So what do I do now?" I asked, hating how lost I sounded. Mark leaned back in his chair, regarding me with a mix of sympathy and professionalism. "That's up to you, John. Some of my clients confront their spouses immediately. Others choose to gather more evidence, maybe consult with a lawyer first. What's your gut telling you?" I thought about it, really thought about it. The old John, the one who believed in the sanctity of our marriage, would have rushed home to confront Emily, to demand explanations and apologies. But that John died the moment I opened that envelope. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to process this, to figure out my next move." Mark nodded approvingly. "That's smart. Don't make any rash decisions. Remember, you've got the upper hand now. Use it wisely." I left Mark's office with the envelope of evidence tucked under my arm, feeling like I was carrying a ticking time bomb. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying every moment of the past 5 years, searching for signs I might have missed. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Emily's car already there. For a moment I considered turning around and driving away. But no. I needed to face this. I needed to look her in the eye, know what I knew. I walked into our house, the home we'd built together now feeling like a stage set for a cruel play. Emily was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. The normalcy of the scene was jarring compared to the chaos in my mind. "Hey, honey," she called out, her voice cheerful and oblivious. "You're home early. Dinner's almost ready." I stood in the doorway, watching her move around the kitchen. She looked exactly the same as she always had, beautiful, graceful. The woman I'd fallen in love with. But now I saw her through a different lens. Every smile, every gesture seemed tainted by deceit. "John?" Emily turned to me, her brow furrowing in concern. "Is everything okay? You look pale." I forced a smile, hating how easy it was to slip into this charade. "Just a long day at work," I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I'm going to take a shower before dinner." As I walked away, I heard her phone chime with a message. I didn't need to look back to know she was smiling at her screen, probably texting Dave. The thought made my stomach turn. In the bathroom, I leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me seemed older, his blue eyes harder than I remembered. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the dreams we'd shared, the future we'd planned, all of it built on a foundation of lies. As the shower ran, masking any sound from the bathroom, I allowed myself a moment of weakness. Tears streamed down my face, mingling with the hot water. I mourned for the marriage I thought I had, for the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. But as quickly as the tears came, they stopped. In their place, a cold determination took root. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Emily had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I stepped out of the shower, dried off, and got dressed. As I reached for the bathroom door, I caught sight of my reflection again. The man in the mirror now looked resolute, his jaw set and eyes glinting with purpose. I had a decision to make. Confront Emily now and watch our marriage implode in a fiery spectacle of accusations and denials, or bide my time, gather more information, and plan my next move carefully. As I walked back to the kitchen, the smell of dinner wafting through the air, I made my choice. I would play the long game. Emily thought she was clever, juggling her affair and our marriage. She had no idea what was coming. "Smells great, honey," I said, plastering on a smile as I entered the kitchen. "What's for dinner?" Emily turned, beaming at me. "Your favorite. I thought you could use a pick-me-up after your long day." I sat down at the table, watching as she served the meal she prepared with such care. Every loving gesture now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I kept my face neutral, determined not to give away what I knew. "You're the best," I said, the lie coming easier than I expected. "What would I do without you?" As we ate dinner, making small talk about our days, I marveled at Emily's ability to compartmentalize. Here she was, acting the part of the devoted wife while carrying on an affair with her co-worker. But I wondered if Dave's wife was sitting across from him right now, just as oblivious as I had been. "Oh, by the way," Emily said casually, reaching for a wine glass, "I might have to work late again tomorrow. We've got a big project coming up, and Dave wants all hands on deck." And I nearly choked on my food at the mention of Dave's name. Recovering quickly, I nodded. "No problem. I've got some work to catch up on anyway. Don't worry about me." Ina smiled, relief evident in her eyes. She probably thought I was the most understanding husband in the world. Little did she know I was already formulating a plan. It was cleaned up after dinner. I watched Emily move around the kitchen, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one in those damning photographs. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face, kissed me goodbye, only to run into Dave's arms? Well, the questions burned in my mind, but I kept them locked away. Now wasn't the time for confrontation. Now was the time for strategy. Later that night, as Emily slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. So I thought about the life we'd built together, the memories we'd shared. I remembered our wedding day, how beautiful she'd looked walking down the aisle, how sure I'd been that we'd grow old together. Now those memories felt tainted, corrupted by the knowledge of her betrayal. But as much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to shake her awake and demand answers, I knew I had to be smart about this. I turned my head, studying Emily's sleeping form. In the soft moonlight filtering through the curtains, she looked angelic, peaceful. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman in those photographs. laughing and touching another man. As I lay there, a plan began to form in my mind. I wasn't going to confront Emily, not yet. I was going to gather more evidence, build an ironclad case, and when the time was right, I would make my move. Emily had no idea what was coming. She thought she was clever, juggling her affair and our marriage with ease, but she'd underestimated me. She'd forgotten that beneath my calm exterior, I was just as capable of calculated moves as she was. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a newfound determination. Emily had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. The game was on, and I intended to win. After I got the photos, the videos, the recordings, everything, I expected something to crack open inside me. Maybe a flood of anger or some gut punch of sorrow. But it never came, at least not like that. I just felt hollow. Like some switch flipped and I got cold, detached, even when I looked at Emily, who only months ago I had been prepared to give the rest of my life to. There was nothing. Just this distant, clinical analysis in my head, like I was studying a stranger, not my wife. At first I wasn't sure how I'd react around her. Would I scream? Throw things? No. The John she saw after I hired that PI probably didn't seem too different from the John she'd known for years. He was still calm, still polite. But slowly, little by little, I could feel the difference. And I know she started seeing it too. It was like flipping a page. One moment I'd been the supportive husband, asking about her day, listening to the little things she'd babble on about after work, the drama with her colleagues, the new campaign she was brainstorming. The next? Silence. I couldn't bring myself to care. I pretended to, obviously. We still ate together, sat on the couch watching whatever show was routine for us. But inside there was just this cold emptiness. Her laugh, the way she would brush her hair behind her ear, shit that once made me feel something, anything, now only served to remind me of her betrayal. The photos, the fucking smug faces in those goddamn photos, maimed all those memories. It was weird, really. At first, Emily didn't seem too concerned about the shift. She'd ask, "Oh, rough day at work?" with a casual, detached concern, maybe throw in a soft smile here and there. Maybe it's stress, she probably thought. Or that I was getting tired from HQ deadlines, or whatever other plausible excuse she invented in her head. She never suspected the real reason. Part of me wondered if she noticed at all, or if she was just too absorbed in her affair fantasy. But honestly, it didn't matter. I let her think whatever she wanted. I had a plan and I wasn't about to ruin it that early. Months passed. More of this slow burn, this gradual distancing where every motion, every conversation between us rang hollow. And then, like some twisted miracle, an opportunity practically fell into my lap. It was around mid-April, 2 weeks before her birthday when she suggested it. We were sitting at the dinner table. It was quiet, like it had become the norm when she casually mentioned, "Maybe, for my birthday, you could go out with the boys for a weekend." What surprised me wasn't even the suggestion of being away on her birthday. Seriously, who even suggests that? But how casually she played it. Between bites of her overpriced sushi, she floated the idea like it was no big deal. "I'll be working late shifts anyway," she said. "It's no biggie." Well, everything about it was weird. Normally, birthdays were a big deal for her. Friends' dinners, the whole lot. Now she wants me out of town. That's when it all came together in my head, clear as day. She wasn't planning to work that weekend, she and Dave. They were going to celebrate without me around to ruin their fun. Even with the mountain of evidence I had already compiled, that moment still hit me square in the face. The nerve. Of course I agreed. I played the part, gave her my award-winning supportive husband smile and told her, "Yeah, sounds good. I'll hit up the guys. Maybe we'll hit Vegas or something." It was pathetic how easy she bought it. I pretended to start making plans for the weekend, even chatted in front of her about this pure fiction bachelor party trip I was partly coordinating. But the truth, I wasn't going anywhere. I'd be here, right where she least expected me. About 2 days before her birthday, I saw it. The discovery that shoved whatever doubts remained right off the cliff. I was in our shared walk-in closet looking for some backup chargers when I came across it. There, tucked behind a row of winter coats we hadn't worn in months, sat an expensive bottle of champagne, and nestled beside it, 2 flute glasses. The sight didn't even make me angry. In fact, it just confirmed it. Emily wasn't being cautious anymore. She was sloppy, careless, assuming she could get away with this. The champagne bottle practically screamed celebration. Her and Dave, no doubt. I didn't touch anything. Left it right where it was, precisely positioned for her big birthday surprise. Only this time, the surprise wouldn't come from Dave. It was going to come from me. That night, I sat alone in a kitchen, phone tight in my grip, thinking through every detail as methodically as I plan out my code. I'd run through dozens of variations of this moment in my head, all the ways I could unearth the truth. Could have been a dramatic confrontation, right? Just me and her. But that wasn't enough anymore. I wanted more. I wanted everyone in the goddamn family to see the pit she'd dug herself into. So, I made the calls I needed. First was Anne, Emily's mother. Simple enough. I pitched it like the perfect, wholesome surprise. I played into her heartstrings. Let's gather everyone up on the morning of Emily's birthday, I said, in a chipper voice that felt alien rolling off my tongue. You can sneak in while she's still in bed. Celebrate right by her bedside after I return early from my trip. Funny, right? Cakes, party hats, you won't see her coming. Anne sounded thrilled. I could hear her pure excitement through the receiver. She raved about how Emily would be overjoyed by the surprise and how wonderful it'd be to have everyone there, united under one roof. She prattled on about making it extra special, utterly blind to the truth hiding behind my every word. But that was fine. Let her believe that for now. Next came Jim, Emily's father. God, the conversation I had with him almost made me feel sorry for the guy. He cut straight to the chase like I expected. Is she really going to go for something cheesy like that? He asked, a skeptical bite in his tone. I worked around it, told him it wasn't about how cheesy it was, just that it was a cute family moment. Some shit about rekindling old traditions before the world got in the way with work schedules and adulting. He bought in after a bit. Jim, practical as always, confirmed that he'd be there. Sarah, Emily's sister, took a bit more convincing. She'd always had this bullshit detector, a spidey sense when it came to me pulling stunts. But after a few reassurances and a light-hearted joke about how much Emily loved surprises, which was half true, she caved. She's always wanted to believe the best in her sister, even when it became obvious how far Emily had strayed from best a long time ago. So by the time I dialed the last number, the echo of "yeah, I'll be there" still fresh on my mind. It was already past midnight. I sat back in the kitchen chair, staring blankly at the empty countertops, feeling that familiar chill sink deeper into my bones. This thing was happening. It was all in motion now, there was no way it wasn't. The plan felt surgically tight, almost perfect. So that morning was surreal. Like I was floating through events instead of actually walking, talking, existing. I watched Emily's mother, Anne, clutching that damn cake like it was some beacon of joy. But little did she know what lay behind that door, waiting for all of them. They were excited in ways I hadn't been in months, hell, maybe years. Balloons in hand, smiles plastered on their faces. It almost made me sick. The juxtaposition of their happiness against the play was organizing in my head, but I stayed calm. Still waters, as always, no ripples, no giveaways. I caught my reflection in the glass doors of the building for a split second before we stepped in. The person looking back at me, he was barely recognizable anymore. Sure, the same blue eyes, the athletic frame, a bit more hollow maybe, but still the same. But those eyes had gone cold, drowning in something darker. Betrayal does that to a man. You think you know your life, your partner. You think you're safe, and then one day the bottom falls out, and you're left scrambling to rebuild or destroy. For now, though, I played the part. The loving, unsuspecting husband, the one who just woke up and decided to make his wife's birthday feel special. I told myself Anne didn't deserve this. That sweet, naive woman had adored me like the son she never had. Her excitement broke my heart a little. I could have warned her. Hell, part of me wanted to. But this thing, it had to be seen to believe. There was no other way. We climbed into the elevator, and someone, not sure who, cracked a joke about how surprised Emily would be. I chuckled along, though that laughter felt foreign to my lips by now. That was the thing about this whole charade. The pretending. I was getting so damn good at it, I practically scared myself. Years of methodical planning at the office, you'd think I won some award for turning off emotions on cue. But this was another level. This was me sitting across from her at dinner, listening to Emily weave her stories about her work schedule, planning a rendezvous with that piece of shit Dave right in front of me, ignoring the candles I'd lit, the wine glasses full. And every lie, it hardened me just a little more. Anne had no idea of the depth or weight of this day. None of them did. They thought they were headed for some joyful, blissful morning. Instead, they were walking into the fallout, oblivious just inches from the blast zone. The door to the bedroom was closed, but faint noises seeped out from behind it. The kind of noises you couldn't mistake if you tried. A soft moan, too soft for someone who thought they were alone, followed by a faint chuckle. Dave's voice. I know that smug, cocky bastards laugh anywhere by now. The months of surveillance burned it into my head. He probably thought he was invincible. Maybe even thought that I was some clueless husband off at work, too stupid to see what had been going on behind my back. I stood at the bedroom door, hand resting just by the doorknob. Time seemed like it slowed, a single heavy breath filling my lungs. No one else noticed, all of them huddled behind me, stifling quiet whispers full of excitement. Especially Anne. Oblivious. Her eyes shimmered, beaming from ear to ear, poor woman, one last fleeting moment of innocence. She thought she was about to burst into the happiest surprise of her daughter's life. It was tragic, in a way. Maybe that's why I gave her a nod as I turned the handle, as if it was some kind of final gesture, placing her body in front of the train before it could crash. The door swung wide open. Ope. Surprise. Reality hit, an explosion of shock and sickening awkwardness. The scene before us, Emily half naked with Dave right behind, his hunched figure wet with sweat. Their faces froze before they could register we just ripped their secret wide open. But then the silence was deafening. The noise stopped, but the damage was instant. I heard a dull thud beside me. Anne's cake hit the floor, candles scattering across the carpet with a soft splat. Her hands trembled at her sides, fingers twitching. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Nothing came out, though her eyes grew wide, filling with horror. The streamers, the balloons, those stupid ass kazoos people insisted on at birthdays, all of it fell useless to the ground like confetti to a funeral. The others behind Anne stood motionless, like they had walked straight into some goddamn nightmare. And in some ways they had. Emily scrambled, her face contorting between shock, fury, and maybe something like shame. Or maybe it was fear. Fear of me. Christ, I hope it was fear. But she had her excuses ready. You could see her mind grinding, right there, spinning with ways to weasel out of this. As if there could be a way out. She didn't even care about the people gathered behind me. Didn't even look their direction. No, her eyes were locked on me. Because she knew that I was the one running this show. I pulled the curtains back. And now it was time to watch everyone fall apart. Dave's expression, though. Confusion, shock. That bastard never saw me coming. Anne swayed next to me, gripping the doorway like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Emily, the center of all this chaos, jumped off the bed like it was on fire. She yanked the sheet around her body, her movements frantic and desperate. Tears were already streaming down her face as she screamed at me. How could you do this? I almost wanted to laugh at the absurdity of her question. How could I do this? How could she do what she'd done to me? But I kept my face impassive, unmoved by her hysteria. I wasn't there for her tears or her accusations. I was there for justice. To expose the truth she tried so hard to hide. Dave, the man I'd once considered nothing more than a colleague of Emily's, was now scrambling to pull his pants on. His face was as red as a tomato, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal looking for escape. So he was trying to leave the room as quickly as possible, probably hoping to disappear from this nightmare scenario. I stood there, cold and unmoved by the pandemonium around me. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, steeling myself against the inevitable emotional onslaught. I wasn't going to break now. Emily's friends, who had come expecting a light-hearted birthday surprise, were quick to turn on her. Jessica, who I knew was one of Emily's closest friends, looked absolutely livid. "I can't believe you would do this, Emily," she shouted, her voice cutting through the cacophony of noise in the room. Another friend, whose name I couldn't remember in the moment, tried to take control of the situation. She started pushing people out of the room, yelling at Emily to stop screaming and for Dave to just leave. It was a futile attempt at damage control, but I appreciated the effort in an odd way. Emily, still sobbing uncontrollably, tried to run after Dave. But he was already halfway down the stairs by the time she made it to the door. I watched as she stood there, wrapped in nothing but a sheet, the realization that he had abandoned her in her moment of exposure slowly dawning on her face. Throughout all of this, I remained largely silent. I let Emily yell, let her beg, let her accuse me of humiliating her. And I knew that my silence would speak volumes. When she finally ran out of words, her voice hoarse from screaming, I spoke. My voice was calm, eerily so given the circumstances. You did this to yourself, Emily, I said, each word deliberate and cutting. You wanted to be out of town so you could fuck him in our bed. You lied, you cheated, and now everyone knows. My words hit her like a physical blow. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I could see the cold detachment in my voice cut deeper than any rage could have. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment outburst. This was calculated, planned, and executed with precision. As the initial shock began to wear off, people started to leave the apartment. The air was thick with awkwardness and discomfort. Anne was still crying, half-heartedly trying to console Emily, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was trying to be the supportive mother, but the shock and disappointment were evident in her every movement. Sarah couldn't even look at her sister. The disgust and betrayal were written all over her face as she hurried out of the apartment, not even sparing a glance back at Emily. I stayed behind long enough to pack a bag and grab my essential things. As I zipped up my suitcase, I could feel Emily's eyes on me, silently pleading. But I was beyond that now. The love I had once felt for her had been replaced by a cold, empty void. Before walking out the door, I looked back at Emily one last time. She was still on the floor, the sheet wrapped around her like a shroud, her makeup smeared across her tear-stained face. "Happy birthday," I said, my voice dripping with icy sarcasm. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The secret I'd been carrying for weeks was out in the open now. Emily would have to face the consequences of her actions, and I was free. I moved out that same day, staying at a hotel, until I could find a more permanent living situation. Within a week, I had filed for divorce. The paperwork felt cold and impersonal, but it was a necessary step in severing the ties that bound me to Emily. I left Emily to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. Any sympathy I might have once felt for her had long since evaporated. The coldness that had started with a betrayal never thawed. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never forgive her. As I walked into my new apartment a few weeks later, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't revenge that gave me closure. It was the simple act of showing her that I had the power to walk away, leaving her with nothing but regret.